Most movies are not ambiguous narratives, but instead easily understood with their comprehensible chronology. However, not all movies are created equal, and whether it be through alternative dimensions, time travel mishaps, or just lazy storytelling, there are still plenty of films that leave audiences bewildered by the start of the closing credits. Here are 10 famous movie timelines that make no sense. The Fast and the Furious franchise. The timeline seemed simple enough until Han showed up in the 4th film, Fast and Furious, even though he died in the 3rd film, Tokyo Drift. Vin Diesel's Dom shows up in the 3rd film to tell Sean that Han used to hang with his crew.
I won it from my friend Han a few years ago.
This is news to viewers, as Han did not appear in the 1st film. It is not until a few films later that audiences are given enough information to figure out that Tokyo Drift takes place between Fast and Furious 6 and Fast 7.
I think we made it!
Hot Tub Time Machine 2. The first Hot Tub Time Machine has plenty of flaws with its time-traveling logic. In the film, 4 guys accidentally go back in time to a weekend ski trip in 1986. While 3 of them look like their younger self to everyone else, Jacob walks around looking like his current self because he was not alive yet. That alone makes little sense in the time-traveling rules, but let us take a look at the much more nonsensical timeline in the sequel. The film opens to show Nick as a famous music producer and performer who in their version of the present has released famous songs such as Smells Like Teen Spirit and Mbop. This would be impossible, as Rob Corddry's Lou is the only one who stayed in the past at the end of the first film. The rest of the plot gets even sillier when Lou is shot and jumps in the hot tub to go back in time and catch the shooter. Only he ends up going into the future to find the killer. This shouldn't make a difference since the shooting has already happened and is not being prevented. Things get worse when they return to the present and see that it was their future actions that caused the shooting in the first place. The Butterfly Effect. The Butterfly Effect does not seem to understand its own chronology and limits for Ashton's character, Evan. One particularly confusing moment is when Evan finds himself in prison and attempts to prove to his religious cellmate that he is able to speak to God. He does this by returning to his childhood, piercing his hands, and returning to show his cellmate scars resembling stigmata. The problem with this is that after Evan goes back in time to hurt himself, the timeline would have shifted because of those actions. However, Evan manages to return to the prison with his cellmate, amazed by the stigmata. Evan would have had those scars once he walked into the prison because he changed the timeline as a child. The change would only be known by Evan, and this is also assuming his actions did not alter his path to prison. The Butterfly Effect has many moments similar to this in a wacky timeline that proves time travel is not a substitution for a cohesive and reasonable plot. The Purge. The 2013 film sets the events of the movie 9 years into the future. In those 9 years, America has enacted a yearly purge that allows law-abiding citizens to commit any crime without consequence. Murder seems to be the primary desire for the general public. The timeline does not make sense for the purge in relation to how quickly everything changed in 9 years. How did America adapt so easily and so quickly to the rules and tradition of the purge? Furthermore, how did citizens become accustomed to cold-blooded murder in such a short time?
Let's tie them up. We'll kill them right here. No.
The Friday the 13th franchise. Jason Voorhees' origin story begins when he is just 11 years old in 1957. Since the counselors were too busy with each other to pay attention to Jason while he was swimming in the lake, he drowns. Jason first appears in the second film, which takes place in 1981. How did this ghost-like entity age even though he died as a child? Since they never found his body, could it be assumed that he did not die that day, but hid away for almost 25 years before exacting his revenge on a new set of counselors? If that is the case, why is he basically immortal? The films get even stranger when you factor in Jason X, in which it is stated that he is in a frozen stasis for 455 years after being placed in the chamber in 2010. This would make Jason 64 at the time of being frozen. That man sure is spry for someone nearing retirement age. Planet of the Apes. In the original Planet of the Apes, the twist ending was a classic, but the remake didn't use a simple twist ending, but rather one that just didn't make any sense. Mark Wahlberg plays an astronaut named Leo, who lands on a planet called Ashlar in the year 5021, where humanoid apes run the world and treat humans as slaves. When Leo returns back to the past and lands in Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial has been replaced with a monument of the ape commander from Ashlar, General Thade. How could this be? How is it that the future could alter the past? Rather than giving audiences an even more shocking twist ending than the original, the film does not provide any answers about the timeline and leaves audiences confused.
I don't want to talk about time travel shit.
Looper. The main issues with the timeline for Looper are the inconsistencies, such as old Joe remembering things that happened to his 25-year-old self, but 25-year-old Joe not remembering events from his 10-year-old self. Pairing that with multiple timelines that are impossible based on choices that are made by other characters and actions made by Joe, Looper has a timeline that seems to do its best throwing audiences through a loop.
You did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Back to the Future 2. In Back to the Future 2, Marty and Jennifer head 30 years into the future to 2015. Once they are there, they see their older selves and their children. However, just as Doc's dog Einstein disappears momentarily to test the time machine in the first movie, this would mean that Marty and Jennifer would not be around in 1985, making it impossible for them to have the kids they are seeing. We can assume that they returned to 1985, with their children's existence being proof of that. It does not explain why they try to hide from their future selves as their future selves would expect them to appear, since they were the ones who traveled in the future 30 years before and would remember doing it.
This is for John Hardigan.
Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. The second film doesn't seem to make sense, even if viewers watch it as standalone stories that need to be sorted like a puzzle. There are characters who should be dead, or two characters who have never met, or somehow forget that they know each other. There are far too many inconsistencies of faulty timelines to even begin to note them all. X-Men: Apocalypse. Magneto is shown in 1983 as a fairly young man and played by Michael Fassbender. Yet Magneto managed to endure Auschwitz as a child nearly 40 years prior. The entire cast is supposed to have aged 20 years, even though the actors were only cast 5 years prior. There is also the disconnection between the events in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. Mystique captured Wolverine and was a villain, but in Apocalypse, Wolverine is free and Mystique is on Team X again. What do you think of our list? Were there any movies we forgot with timelines that left you befuddled? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the Screen Rant channel to see more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.